Robin Oots. I'm with the U.S. Department of Education, work in the Office of Vocational and Adult Education in the Division of Academic and Technical Education. And my branch is the College and Career Transitions branch, and the department looks to us as the programs of study unit. We talked about the program specialist. They look at our branches being the programs of study implementers and that type of thing. So we also, with that role, is we also, with state formula monitoring, if your state were to get monitored, that we would be a part of that team. That my team would be for the programs of study packet. So my background includes, I mentioned the rigorous programs of study grantees, and Kansas was one of those grantees, or they're in their fourth year, and I was at the state of Kansas at that time, so implementing rigorous programs of study. So like a lot of you, with the experiences when Perkins came about and programs of study was in the legislation, how are you going to implement this? So we took our 6 to 8 program areas, the vocational education areas, and then moved them to career cluster pathways, much like what a lot of us are doing. So, and then trying to implement the rigorous program of study in the design framework. So what I thought we would do is we'd go over the steps and just kind of talk about where we are, maybe what's working and what your needs are, especially at a local level, what you see happening and where you see where you need some help. So, and I'm going to be behind me. So I'll tell you what, this PowerPoint is on the Minnesota State Department of Education. I perused your place a lot, so I'm make sure where I found it. It's at a PowerPoint, and it's in the consortium leaders or administrators packet. So really just took slides off of that, so I appreciate that. So again, mentioned the career cluster piece. Minnesota has so nicely, looked at programs of study required elements and how it relates to the 10 components. So the whole purpose of this, the 10 components, what we talk about it being is that taken together, it's a high-quality career and technical education program. They're equal components. There's not one that's more important than another, but together, it's implementing all 10 that's going to get you that high-quality program. Local programs, again, looking at your local needs and making sure what's pressing. I got to tell you, yesterday at the end of the day, we kind of talked about, what do you need help with? What's the hardest? And it was the credit transfer agreements. That is not unlike most other states. It's just a system wasn't built, and the secondary and post-secondary systems were built, kind of in isolation, and so it's making those connections. That is the hardest, I think, across the board on true implementation. So again, we call it Program of Study Plus, or what do you call it, like Programs of Study on steroids there when it first came out of the design framework. I like that. So again, flexible, it's continuous process, and then to the 10 components. So who is well-versed in the 10 components design framework? And it's okay if you're not. Like, who can shout out the 10, you know what I'm talking about? Right. So I can say, what's number 3? And you're going to be able to tell me. And number 5. So the other thing is that it's not in isolation. It's not like number 3, I'm going to talk like in code right now with you. Like number 3 is also like number 7 and number 6, and you need the one to work with the other. It was professional development with teaching and learning strategies is what I was doing. So right away, legislation and policies. So some of us said, no, we're not well versed. So talk to me a little bit about your policy and legislation that happens at not just state level, because I know we're a local control state, and so what's happening at your local institutions that's helping with practice? That when leadership changes, it's still sustainable. So that's kind of what this is all about. So do you have any practices or policies? Actually, do you have any policies or legislation that isn't in statute or that isn't in a program improvement plan that you're like, why is this not included? Or gosh, if we just had this passed, we could really make this happen. Anything?
I suppose I need that. You know, that's interesting because I think that where we often feel stymied is that, you know, we have state statute that does not allow state academic standards in the career and technical fields. So we always talk about local control, and local control usually is deemed in terms of local selection on how to operate things. But really in Minnesota, at the secondary level, local control means that each independent school district is to establish its own standards for career and technical education. So our practice has been to try to point to our other areas of collaboration as a guiding tool for local standard development. So when we look at this whole idea of policies, you know, while each school district is to have some policy that makes career and technical education available for students and has local standards in place, there is really little monitoring to see how that occurs, and it is incumbent then upon the local consortium to say, are our members in fact moving the initiative forward?
So in that, is there any statutes or legislation or policies that are barriers that work against the rigorous program of study implementation or those components?
Well, I don't think I'd call it a barrier. I would say that it's more that the role of the state is to provide guidance, but that the local decisions are inconsistent. So it's not a barrier per se. It would be a barrier if we had this perception that there would be a commonality across the state. And so that commonality may not be in place.
I think one of the barriers that we've had in Minnesota and probably across the nation is the ability to deliver academic credit in our career and tech ed programs. And so when we look at No Child Left Behind and we look at graduation requirements that Minnesota has put in place, sometimes we find it difficult for our teachers to, one, deliver academic credit, or to be recognized as a part of a student's need for graduation. And so I would say that's, you know, if you were going to identify probably the sticking point for career and tech ed, that's one of the sticking points that I see.
I think the other thing that I think really is missing as far as in our state too as well is, as I mentioned yesterday, is that we talk so much about rigorous program of study, but we don't really talk a lot about the feeder system that goes into it, and that's a career development process. And you know, if we had something where a student had to take a career class earlier onset, maybe I would say probably 8th or 9th grade, probably 9th grade would probably be the best, even though it's a full year of academics already. It set the stages so that students then can start to take a look at programs of study that really meets their needs and interest. And I think right now it's sprinkled throughout the state, but it's not very formalized at all. And so even though we have our legislation around something similar to that, there is no set standard or set means of implementing that.
Robin, I'd say from Minnesota State colleges and universities, we do have a number of Board of Trustees policies on things like career information and academic program. But the kinds of things that we're looking at right now are certainly about that credit for prior learning and how that works out in terms of a number of different arenas, and including high school to college articulation. We're also expecting that we'll have some recommendations in the Charting the Future report that's going to our board next week about the transitions and about credit for prior learning. So we expect that we'll have increased conversation about that throughout this next spring and this year. And it gives us some opportunities to really look at how that pathway to post-secondary education occurs and what we actually put into policy and procedure that help us be more consistent as a system in how we approach things, and also provide guidance. Many times our policies say each college will have a policy about fill in the blank. And then that means that we all work together to do those policies. Where we find it, each college must have accreditation, as you mentioned in your opening remarks, and they must be accredited by the Higher Learning Commission. So where we find successful implementation of rigorous programs of study, it's in alignment with what the college is doing for their accreditation requirements as well. And and where they're using technical skill assessments, it's in alignment with how they're assessing students' liberal arts and sciences, how they're assessing students in multiple ways. So technical skill attainment assessment of that is one piece of the puzzle. So I think that's the challenge for us to think about it, is how much of this do we really want to have defined in college policy as we're implementing things in a very flexible way. So but it does give us an opportunity right now to look at some definitions for career pathways, to look at whether or not we want something about programs of study in college policy, university policy.
I'll just add that as I look at those 5 subcomponents, and this is even before I'm looking at these today, I have felt that we're doing pretty well in this particular component. And the one piece that I will say I'm really pleased about is the support from state leadership. Both Dan and Joanne have been very much working on this whole idea of program of study development and implementation. And I think you're seeing that this is just part of what we're doing now in this state, as it's maybe not at the point where it's sustainable, but it's getting there. And we've got pockets that have already gotten this happening, that it is that long-term sustainability of program of study. It's about, like you and I talked about yesterday, we got about a third of them that just know how they're going to have it happen. And so I think this is one of the components that I feel we're doing pretty well in.
I want to go back a little bit to what Al talked about in this. How do you get students prepared, or how do they explore careers? And when we start to talk about rigorous programs of study, it kind of makes me sit back and say, what's the purpose of our career and tech ed programs at the secondary level? And quite frankly, I think that's career exploration. So I think our product should be a student who has defined the career pathway that they want to go into and understands the post-secondary programs that align with that, and then has the academic background and preparation to be successful when they get to post-secondary. And that's probably where we've, if there's an area where we've really faltered, that's probably where we've faltered. But I think what I'm struggling with is, what's the relationship to a program of study, a rigorous program of study, and our career and tech ed programs that are out in our secondary schools today?
Yeah, true. I'll just get this out of the way right away. When we look at rigorous programs of study as well, and even in our template, we talk a lot about the academic pieces, but then also the other pieces that go along with it, the enhanced versions, the experiential learning. And as you mentioned even in your presentation, it's sprinkled all through Washington and whatever, yet we don't really take that as the next step. And I think we need to do more of that, because right now what people look at experiential learning as maybe letting kids go out and just work, and that's it. And it's not really any tied back to the school or the academic piece. The other thing is experiential learning can come in multiple fashions. It can come in the form of informational interviews, job shadowing, things like that. And people forget about those things, yet when we talk about a real, concrete, rigorous programs of study, we need to have conversation around that, as how can we build that into that with that students, that they are making good choices around that.
So I'm going to respond to some of our topics, because I've got to not, I'm ready to talk. I can't keep it inside. Great stuff. And I agree with everything that you said, and I've got some states that are doing some things. I have some questions. so back to the prior learning of giving credit for prior learning, are we giving credit when you think of the experiential learning, work-based learning, is it receiving credit? Are students earning credit for those experiences? And I think of the SAE and experiential learning as an example, are those students receiving credit? Is that a credit-bearing experience in post-secondary or in their next step? Is that credit-bearing in, as a part of that? Or it could be, in an education and training career cluster, that student teaching experience, the observations, all that, is that getting credit?
We have many examples of that. Internships, we have policy about credit for prior learning. We have examples where college are accepting results of courses which have NOCTI assessments as part of their credit for prior learning. Sometimes those are courses that have been taken in a high school setting or through adult basic education, but usually it's tied to some type of industry certification or some kind of assessment system, and teachers and faculty get together and assure the quality of that. We also have quite a concurrent enrollment program, which in Minnesota would be called PSEO. We have flexibility. We have good examples of that happening. We have examples of giving credit for apprenticeships, but we can always do better and to make that more publicly known and to figure out ways to help that collaboration occur, which absolutely needs to happen.
So in regards to that, another question I had is, what do you define as a credit in the state of Minnesota? What is a unit of credit? And based on that, is a Carnegie unit is that infiltrated in that definition?
And that's kind of the direction I wanted to go with the comments too, because when we're looking at credit at the secondary level, that's defined in statute, and it is comparable to a Carnegie unit for the most part, though each individual school district sets its own kind of credit arrangement at the local level. But in statute, it says students will take a certain number of credits in a certain number of subjects.
Does it have a part in there about saying it could be proficiency-based or that shows proficiency?
And what we have in Minnesota is kind of a dual system where we have state-defined academic standards in many of our subjects. We also have credit requirements, and students to graduate from high school in Minnesota need to meet both. They have to demonstrate proficiency in standards, and they have to meet credit assignment. I think that one of our dilemmas is that our entire system of credits and standards and so forth was developed essentially without real thought to a program of study model that spans the secondary to post-secondary transition. And so when we've been doing our work, we admittedly have put most of our emphasis on credit, meaning the work that students do within a program of study and a way to recognize that work so that it's recognized as a certain level of proficiency for the student who moves on. We would love to see that happen through our technical assessment process or something. We're just not there yet.
Right, so it was mentioned yesterday in the technical skill assessments to have that, look at that being credit-bearing or, evidence of that. So I'm just saying that to you so, so that is heard and looking at that. The other thing is you mentioned, earning academic credit in career and technical education classrooms and the teacher qualifications being a barrier. That is what we hear loud and clear. I experienced that in Kansas also. There is a state, Alabama, that says they have solved that issue, that they look at teacher of record and look at that. So I encourage you to have a conversation maybe with Alabama to see how they're doing those things.
Are you referring to high school credit or college credit when you say credit? Are you referring to high school credit or college credit when you say credit?
When I said it in that vein, it was high school credit. So it was it was horizontal alignment and then also vertical alignment. So which may or may not be also concurrent enrollment. So it could be, so yes. The other thing to talk about, sorry, just with career development issues with that is there's been states that not only do they pass, the requirement that students have a career plan of study, they also make sure that there's career guidance and counseling services with that. And so South Carolina is kind of a lead that we look at for that state. Also Washington State has done some things, but again, it's not just here's the plan and here's legislation, but there's built in that there's that requirement of career guidance and counseling. It's not necessarily the career counselors or your school counselors that are providing it. So with that, South Carolina has in their legislation that teachers become career development facilitators. And so there's been states that's modeled that. And so it's an academic teacher, it's somebody that's in charge of the career guidance center, it's a post-secondary teacher, it's a workforce development person, but they're trained to be career development facilitators and then come in and mentor students paired up that way. So what I see working really well is that it's the workforce investments like the Department of Commerce or your regional workforce development staff, they become career development facilitators, then they come into the high schools and talk about careers and talk about that issue. The other model that I see working well is the community colleges or your post-secondary teachers and faculty become career development facilitators and they come into the high schools. So there's a different dynamic to have a high school student listen to their English teacher talk about careers versus a post-secondary, a person coming from post-secondary education, from higher ed. I could go to college, and it's, of course, they're not talking about just their institution. They're trained to talk about all careers. So that's a model that I see that really goes into the programs of study. Oh, thanks, Dan. We're only on number one. We're not. We've totally thrown that with the pillars. Let's see, credit, academic teachers. Okay, so where were we? We had some other comments that I just kept talking and interrupting.
Well, I just wanted to share with you that your question about the definition of credit is under conversation within the Minsky system in our Academic and Student Affairs Council, Policy Council. And the discussion is that in the past, certainly it allowed for competency-based education, but we always had to align that with the Carnegie units, and that is changing. It's changing, the language is changing in the Higher Learning Commission requirements, moving much more to being much more allowing competency-based education. And so how should that definition, should we still keep a time relationship in there or not, is part of the question. So I think we'll see some changes coming out in the next few months.
There is a webinar on Monday that hit my email, and it is the association, the American Association of Community Colleges is looking at competency-based education for community colleges. So, and that's American Progress. So you're right, the conversations are occurring. And I asked about the unit because that was a barrier when I think of Joel's question about the teacher qualifications and stuff, and then academic and CTE, that was the barrier, was how do you define a credit? And actually, not just a barrier, but it opened up the floodgates going, oh, it says or proficient or meet that.
Well, and there are a lot of other things that are happening, what's going on with MOOCs, what's going on with badges, that all becomes part of the conversation. And so for faculty, the question is, how do we continue to assure quality in that arena? And how do we stand behind what it is that we're awarding?
Something that we also discovered when we think of rigorous programs of study, and I mentioned the vertical alignment, the academic and career and technical ed integration. Who are the teachers that you think of when you think of those implementing a rigorous program of study? who teaches those courses?
I think we would jump to our CTE teachers first. You know, in our thinking, we always define our programs of study as being a sequence of both academic and technical courses, but most of our discussion to date has been with our CTE teachers and faculty.
So with that in mind, I want you to think of a rigorous program of study, and again, it's academic and CTE courses, kind of in a plan. I kind of shot it up on the screen really fast. I want you to think about it in the respect that it's all those teachers that student, if you think of the student's pathway, where they take English and algebra and maybe a liberal arts, CTE, it's all of those teachers. So it's all those teachers that touch that student or is available for that student. So I encourage you to really look at the academic courses in that as a program of study when you talk about it. Because it's not, here's what we also found, you know, when you think of RPOS and rigorous program of study, it's a CTE thing and it stays in CTE. And we look at it as program of study as being high school redesign, high school redeform, it's all school. And I don't mean to just land on high school, but you know, it's all education, not just a CTE thing. And we don't want to get caught in that because we see that it happens to groups. So questions or comments about that? Is that an accurate depiction of what may be going on in Minnesota?
We're in conversation with our upcoming high school to college transition summit, and that has been something that we are labeled. Rigorous program of study right now is labeled CTE, and it's something that we know we need to work on, but our colleagues at Minnesota State Colleges and Universities are, and I think Department of Ed, some of those folks too, don't see that it's the same piece. And I think, you know, I'm going to say this, I see it as so solid. I don't know if they know how to do it. I mean, partnering for them is different than what we've always been doing this. Career guidance and counseling, we've always been doing that. I think it's almost like we need to really be working with them to help them understand that this is a role that they need to be playing as well. So
if you think about it from a student perspective, I mean, it's all those wraparound services, it's all everything that's a part of that student's educational experience. And so it's not just a CTE track by all means. But involvement with both. There's been states that actually that have restructured and reorganized just to get academic and technical education on the same, you know, in the same structure. It took that much of a bold statement to see, no, this rigorous program of study is everybody's responsibility. So much so that the state staff was monitoring for Perkins. They were in charge of a pathway. So it really breaks down the silos. The other part of breaking down the silos, if you think of your career and technical education group, your experts, is even breaking down the silos within those areas. So let me give you an example. We'll use accounting. So we'll use an accounting class. Where is it typically housed, or who's typically in charge of accounting? It's a business education. Mm-hmm. So that business education teacher, right. So can you have an accounting class in an agriculture pathway?
Yes. Whether you're applying it, keeping books in carpentry, or you're keeping books for medical, or you're keeping books for anything, debits on the left, show credits on the right. Absolutely. And it should,
So,
because you are going to have a lot of accounting and agriculture entities.
in the student handbook at the local level at your high schools, is accounting listed as part of the agriculture pathway?
I'm going to say no, but when I go out to work with schools, the first thing I do is look at the whole registration guide, and I think you start to look at the relationships. So if you do have a student that does want to go into ag business, that they realize they need to get over and take some courses in the business department.
Just a quick add, because accounting is a wonderful example for us, because we actually have legislation in Minnesota that says teachers who are licensed to deliver economics are teachers either of social studies, business, or agriculture. So it is one of those areas where we actually have policy that permits some cross-fertilization. I would hate to see us have to have special legislation for every subject, but it's a start.
Right, and I'm not proposing that at all. I'm just thinking of practices. I'm not following the 10 components in order. That went in a handbasket. Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to circle back just a little bit to talk about the career responsibility, because we did some research with the National Research Center a couple of years ago, and it got to the career guidance piece. And I started to think about that a little bit differently as we've tried to deliver academic standards in agriculture sciences, and as we've started to work on rigorous programs of study and technical skill attainment. And it led me to ask the question, have we become technical education, and have we abandoned the career side of career and technical education as we've tried to become something more to students? And so when career guidance is everybody's responsibility, sometimes it becomes nobody's responsibility. And what's your thoughts on that? Or where we go?
I agree, but I do think that it needs to be, more emphasis need to be placed, which is why I mentioned the career development facilitator piece. I mean, that needs to be someone's role, because I do believe that in the subjects that we teach in career and technical education, it's about relevance, it's about engagement. Students get excited and passionate about our coursework, and we become, even by accident, we become career development. We become guidance experts, and we talk about careers. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. But I do think that there needs to be not only us saying it, but an outside, a formalized process to make it work. I don't know if that answered it at all. And that's, I need to do a disclaimer. That's not necessarily the position of the U.S. Department of Education. I'm just talking.
I have a question. You mentioned South Carolina and the work that they've done in training their CTE teachers and academic teachers and career counselors. Mm-hmm. So that sounds like a pretty massive professional development enterprise to train all of those folks to be career advisors. Could you talk a little bit about how they managed that or how they implemented that in South Carolina?
And it's taken years to do so. So right now, because we're a part, because Kansas tried to embrace that training, and South Carolina has made it so it's pretty individualized. It's a hybrid class, it's online, but it is. I mean, it's a college course and certification to become a career development facilitator. So it's that rigorous. So yes, it took it took funding. Right. It took, yeah.
So it's part of the teacher preparation or teacher accreditation sequence, or is it over and above that?
I think it was over and above because it's its own legislation. Now I'll say this. Now I'll say, should it be part of the teacher preparation program? I would argue yes. It certainly could be.
And I agree totally. I think, and here's the reason. It goes back to what Joel was also talking about. Is that if we want all our teachers to teach or at least have some input around career exploration, they need to know what it is that they're doing, because 9 out of 10 times when people think of career development, it's job applications, interviewing skills, and resumes, and that's such a small piece of everything. And so I think it's really important that if we're going to deliver a comprehensive type system, that training has to take place. The other piece that I've encountered now within since the legislation came out is that how to deliver it across your school systems in Minnesota is because the unions are starting to get involved in it and saying, this is not part of my job or my job description. So that's one of the barriers that I'm encountering right now when we start to look at a more formalized all-school buy-in is that really isn't part of my, my role.
Right, and so to counteroffer that, so when I said you bring in the workforce development specialists, because they're trying to get into the high schools, and so they could deliver, the ACT Work Keys assessment and sit down and have a conversation with, what does this score mean for you in regards to careers or your next steps. So it's the model is not taking, it's almost like, like you said, the unions, people are in place, they didn't show up to be a career development facilitator, but yet there's people out there that want to be able to get into the high schools and provide that. So you find those cheerleaders and those that are willing to do it.
And we have a couple models in Minnesota that are actually doing that right now. And again, some schools allow them in, some schools don't allow them in. So
Right.
that's the other piece you run into.
Which reminds me, another state took a not such an aggressive model, and that's Virginia with career coaching. And as this is as much as I know about it, as I saw a presentation at ACTE on what was going on. So, but it was career coaches. So it wasn't such a full-blown, a teacher becomes certified as a career development facilitator. It was not as formalized, but I've heard that model more than once. with
Robin,
that.
it's gained quite a bit of support from the National Council of State Directors of Community Colleges, and they've also implemented that model in Arkansas, and with various sources of funding. And what happens is that they employ college career counselors to go into the high schools and do career counseling in the high school. So there is certainly an investment and an expense of that, but what they're finding is that then students are much better prepared for their college experiences. And it's been very successful in Virginia and Arkansas. Arkansas also really worked with their major employers, Tyson, to help support that, and so they've used various sources of funding for that. And they've also had legislation in Virginia in particular to support that.
Then also to talk about the importance of career guidance and counseling is the recent report I mentioned, the PIAC report, which was the adult literacy report. And it also, in a webinar that I saw the other day, they were talking about career guidance and counseling for adult learners and the importance of that. So they too, in the adult education and literacy, they also recognize that the career guidance and counseling piece maybe has been missed. So if that needs work with that. We have 2 minutes left. 2 minutes left, and we kind of talked about barriers and just kind of dove in to the components kind of haphazardly. But again, it shows you how everything is so connected, and you can't just isolate one particular component, but working together for that. Jenny, did you have a comment?
Mike?
Oh,
Quick question with 2 minutes left. I need your thoughts on this because you mentioned that they need to be implementing all 10 components for a rigorous program of study, and that seems to be overwhelming for some of our leaders. And so it's been to take it, and they're all at different stages within those 10 components. We understand it. But I guess I'm not sure if anybody else has developed the rubrics model like we have, where we're letting them analyze how they're doing and on the 10 components, and we've got a level 1, level 2, level 3. I don't know if anybody else is doing anything like that where they're trying to assess.
implementation. Right. We have the self-assessment out on the OVE website or the CTE website, starting at the self-assessment. And there's also Wisconsin has done a lot of that with their local level of assessing it to what degree. The other thing is even just looking at it do you feel at the local level, is it critical? Is this component critical? And so even identifying that on where you start. So, it's looking at it from, like you said, overwhelming. 10 is a lot. Who's thought of 10? That's a lot of components. But looking at it from other areas, make sure that there's connectivity. So the CTE teacher is not doing it, or the CTE director is not doing all of it, but broadening that out and recognizing that this is happening in other areas. If that makes any sense at all? But yeah, responsibility for not just, it's a comprehensive responsibility. And again, whole school design.
Thank you, Robin.
Well, thank you. It's good conversation. Very good.